And so my research focuses on media change and innovation. And the innovations I want to talk about today are service innovations. Service innovations, they are a bundle of technical and social organizational innovations that not only shape now public and private communications, but also many other life domains as well. So I'm talking about internet-based services that build on automated algorithmic selection. So that would be search engines, computational advertising, recommender systems, and you know such services are booming right now, and the companies that offer such services belong to the most valuable companies worldwide. So I would argue that all of you here in the room are experiencing the social impact of these services on a daily basis, and this impact, this social impact, I would call algorithmic governance, or also I would call it the governance by algorithms. So algorithms shape your lives, they shape your realities, I would argue, they change your perception of the world, they affect your behavior by influencing your choices, and altogether on a macro level I would argue they are a source and also a factor of social order in a digitized society. So I started a research program on algorithmic selection in 2011 in Zurich, and today I would like to talk about my most recent research project in this area, and I would like to present first results. And this project, which is funded by the Swiss National Science Foundation, asked a very simple question. And the simple question would be, what is the actual significance, what is the relevance of algorithmic governance in everyday life? So we try to give an empirical answer to this question, and I think this answer is necessary and it's currently missing, and we need it in order to develop adequate policies in the governance of algorithms. Yeah? Respectively also for artificial intelligence, which is obviously very tightly connected with algorithmic selection. So there's a lot of confusion right now regarding the terms that are used in this context. And this is why I would like to start with some basic definitions. In its widest definition, algorithms are problem-solving mechanisms. So they are sorting, they are matching, they are ranking, they are predicting, and so on. But the focus of my research is not on single algorithms per se, or as computer scientists will call it, on the code, but the focus is on services and applications. Why? Because if you want to analyze the social implications of algorithms, then you have to focus on the social context, how they are used, what they are used for. So this full picture is only reflected if you look at these applications, if you look not only at the code, but you also look at the coders, the providers of the services, and last not least, you have to look at the users. So what we do is we empirically grasp this phenomenon by focusing on applications that build on algorithmic selection on the internet. And algorithmic selection is essentially defined here as the automated assignment of relevance to selected pieces of information. So that would be the basic definition. To analyze now these bundles of innovations, I'm taking a co-evolutionary perspective. What does it mean? I'm looking at the interplay of technical, social, organizational, and political innovations in this area. And algorithms, which are basically software technology, they are understood on the one hand as institutions. As institutions, they are active like norms and rules that define what is possible and what is not possible. That would be one part of it. Algorithms in that perspective could be active as ideologies. Why? Because they transport and they convey the built-in values of their designers. That's the first perspective I take. Another perspective that I take on algorithms is as intermediaries. So think about search or news aggregation services. What do? They squeeze themselves in between producers on the one hand and the users on the other side. Yeah? So they act as intermediaries. And if you take it on a more bigger level, you could say that the traditional reality construction by mass media is now mediated by algorithmic selection applications like search engines. So finally, they can be understood as actors. Yeah? And as actors themselves. So technology has agency. And this agency can be either imposed, in that sense it would be intentionless, or it is delegated. It's a delegated agency in a sort of a trustee mode within a predefined range of possible actions. So the different degrees of automatization and autonomy are set by the designers. Algorithmic services are at least partially examples of narrow artificial intelligence. And what does it mean? This means it basically refers to rule-based systems that simulate human intelligence in order to solve well-defined problems. So this algorithmic selection is, on the one hand, it's aiding, on the other hand, it's replacing human decision-making. And the degree of automatization differs widely within this human and non-human co-production. And distinctions of systems where humans are in, on, or out of the loop can be very helpful, especially also for policy making. And there are also other categorizations that we can take which are helpful in this context. Categorizations that differentiate between different degrees of automatization, as for instance used for autonomous vehicles, can be helpful in this respect. In earlier research, we developed now a functional typology of algorithmic selection services. So there are different societal functions of these services, and the range, as you can see here, they range from search, aggregation, surveillance and forecasting, to filtering, recommendation, scoring, content production, allocation. But you should be aware that services like, for instance, social media and e-commerce sites often combine now multiple types of such algorithmic selection applications. These services consist of different algorithms, e.g. search applications include crawling, ranking, etc., but it's also combined, for instance, with computational advertising. This is also important if you make proposals for regulation and if you ask then, please control these algorithms. So that doesn't work because of these combinations that are in place here. So this typology, what I'm showing here, is not exhaustive, but it's already showing now the magnitude of the whole phenomenon. It's showing how many life domains are already affected, and it also poses a long list of research questions. So in my research program on algorithmic selection, I focus on the following topics. I distinguish here now between the economics of algorithmic selection, then the governance by and of algorithms, and finally case studies. So under the title of economics, we looked at typologies of services. I already showed you one example of that. We're looking at the societal functions, and we also look strongly on business models. Business models including the value proposition, the value production, and also the implied revenue models. This governance by algorithms is also referred to as algorithmic governance. And we argue that there is an algorithmic reality construction, I already mentioned that, and this algorithmic reality construction differs strongly from the reality construction by traditional mass media. We tried to point out these differences in a paper on this issue. So this is one thing that has to be considered. Yeah? And on the macro level then, it has the effect that the social order is also impacted by this individual reality construction, algorithmic reality construction in this respect. My latest project, which is highlighted here in red, is now on algorithmic, on the significance of algorithmic selection in everyday life. It's on the relative importance of algorithmic selection services in everyday life compared to offline and online alternatives. And we'll get back to this project in a minute. First, I want to mention that now the results of the research on the governance by algorithms, the output of this research, and it's mostly about risks that are involved with these algorithmic selection services, they are at the same time the input for research on the governance of algorithms. And here in this part, I'm taking an institutional risk-based approach to the governance of algorithms in that case, and I'm combining it with the governance choice method in order to find the right mix of private and public modes of governance. So let me now turn to my latest project on the significance of algorithmic selection in everyday life. So far, most of the projects have been top-down, theoretically derived results on algorithmic governance that we have, especially on risks. And this has many deficits, I would argue. Why? Especially also for the policy debate, as I would like to show you now. These theoretical discussions derive a long list of risks that are attached to these algorithmic services. They are ranging from manipulation to discrimination. There are many examples, misinformation, bias because of intensive social media use and so on. So without this empirical data that we're trying to produce here, this empirical data on the magnitude of these risks, there is a big danger to get it wrong and to get to immature policy conclusions. And with our novel empirical insights about the significance of algorithmic selection for daily life, from a user's perspective, we want to grasp now the magnitude of these risks. We try to get a more realistic picture of the importance of risks of algorithmic selection in daily life. Compared now to other empirical research projects, our project has the advantage to be representative for Switzerland. Otherwise, you can find many studies with convenient samples in algorithm studies, and it also goes beyond the study of single services, like Facebook mostly, looking at a broad range of internet services applied in various life domains. So our research design follows a mixed methods approach. We start with a systematic literature review. This will be published in December. We made also 60 qualitative interviews that were the basis for the design of a representative online survey. This paper will also be published in December. And this survey is now combined with a representative internet user tracking. So we are also tracking the same people that we are surveying. We are tracking them for 1 month, both on desktop and mobile devices. And we already have the data. These collected data, this is more than 2.5 million URLs that we collected, currently prepared now for analysis. And finally, there will be a theoretical appraisal of our empirical results. But today I will focus now on some results out of the online survey. Let's take a look at our measurement model. So we are using 5 variables to measure the significance of algorithmic selection in everyday life. First, we want to weigh these applications compared to online and offline alternatives. And this is usually done by measuring the amount and frequency of use. That would be the usual way. However, as I will show, this is not sufficient. We also have to consider the subjectively assigned relevance to these services. And the importance of this variable I will point out. So there are two more variables to measure this significance. They're regarding the awareness, both the awareness of algorithmic selection in general and also awareness of related risks of algorithmic selection. And finally, we are looking at user practices. So users apply tactics in order to deal with algorithmic selection services. And with these tactics, they try both. On the one hand, they try to help the algorithms. One example would be in the case of Spotify. They're trying to help this algorithm. And on the other side, they try to trick these algorithms, often in the case of advertising, of e-commerce sites, using anonymous modes, ad blockers, VPNs, and so on. So in the end, it's a combination. It's a combination of company strategies on the one side and user tactics that has to be considered in order to derive to the significance of algorithmic selection in everyday life. So the significance could also differ strongly between various life domains within everyday life. So we selected now 5 life domains in order to research the impact on everyday life. We investigated social and political orientation, commercial transactions, socializing, entertainment, and health. Now, this is already now the last part of the presentation. I would like to present some empirical results that we are currently working on. The title of the working paper should be telling. It's the relevance people assign to algorithmic selection applications in everyday life, a comparison with online and offline alternatives in 5 life domains. So the goal of this paper is to substantiate, to question and to qualify the current claims on the high social impact of algorithmic selection services. And these often premature claims drive the current policy debate on algorithmic selection, also on artificial intelligence. And these claims might be misleading, as I would argue. So that's why we want to grasp now the magnitude of risks that are associated with algorithmic selections from a user perspective. So we assume, for example, that there's a difference between usage time on the one hand and the relevance of algorithmic selection services in daily life. And that is why we ask for the relevance that users assign to algorithmic selection services compared to online and offline alternatives. We need this information for our risk assessment. I told you I'm using a risk approach then for the governance of, and so we need this information for doing that as a basis for policy recommendations. So we want to know also if there are now differences across the life domains that I mentioned, the 5 life domains, and if there are differences across social demographic groups and also personal characteristics. So this nationwide representative online survey in Switzerland, it included 1,200 persons, and the list of relevant services that we are assessing was derived from qualitative interviews with about 58 persons. So now let me show you some results, and first for single life domains. Let's start with the most discussed life domain, which is opinion formation. So this figure shows you the subjectively assigned relevance for political and social orientation. So the question was, please assess the importance of the following services and activities for your opinion formation on political and societal issues. So we use the Likert scale. You can see it here going from 1 to 5. 1 means not relevant at all, and 5 would mean very relevant. Yeah, so you can see it on the top. And what you can also see here, that the figure shows you the relevance score. It's in percentage of population, so you see it here. This is the percentage of population. You have it here from up to 100%. So you can see how many voted, for instance, in this case, offline context said it's most important, yeah, with 5. Yeah, so you can see how big it is. Just that you can read it. And also we pointed out here what we consider as algorithmic selection services is in bold. So alternative services, also online services, are in italics. Yeah, and the rest would be offline alternatives. So and participants assigned now the relevance that 13 activities and services had for their individual opinion formation on political and social issues. So what did we find? On the one hand, you can see that offline contacts, such as talking to the family and friends, were not only the most frequently assigned the highest relevance score. You see 45% said it's the most important, but also it had the highest mean relevance. So the means are listed here, and they are shown here, and it's ordered by the means here in services. So this is obvious. But also you can see the next, what's following here, voting booklets, traditional television, print media would be also offline alternatives. Yeah, they're also ranked very high. Maybe I should explain a little bit voting booklets. That's a peculiarity in Switzerland. Yeah, so it's a printed brochure that is sent out before every vote in Switzerland to every household. Yeah, and it's considered to be very, very important there.
And it's produced by who?
It's by the government. Yeah, it's produced by the government, but it has always inside the position of the government and also the position of those who who came up with this vote. Yeah, and then the government says they are supporting it or they're against it and why they're against it. And it's also all the arguments are inside. Excuse me?
Yeah, so it's not voting for the government, it's voting for a referendum. For
It's all sure. Yeah, no, these are for the votes for the referendum. It's not for the elections. Thanks. Yeah. And what you can see here as well, that on the other hand, social media is rated the lowest here. Yeah, social media was ascribed the lowest relevance of all activities, both when we are looking at the frequency of the highest relevance score, 3%, and also if it's measured by the mean with 2.10. Ranking 5th here is online news media that was attributed the highest relevance of all algorithmic selection applications for political and social orientation, closely followed then by Wikipedia and by search engines. I show you not for every live domain, but one more. Yeah, let's take a look at commercial transactions. So in this commercial transaction live domain, again, we can see offline contacts are ranked highest, followed by physical shops. Again, 2 offline alternatives on top. Then we have online reviews, which is ranked very high with a mean of 3.14, and online shops with 2.97. Surprising was especially the online reviews. It's ranked very high here. Obviously, it seems that it has substituted already some traditional alternatives. And it's also ranking before another one in this area, personalized ads, which is ranked with a mean of 1.91. So that would be a second example for live domains. Out of time reasons, I don't show you the others now. But let's now return to the opinion formation, and we're asking also, are there differences on the socio-demographic level? So on this slide, we can see how the assigned relevance regarding opinion formation differs between age groups. So we can see here offline contacts are considered most relevant for social and political orientation amongst all age groups. And interesting, you can see here that the younger internet users are assigning an even higher relevance to them. Yeah? So the mean is 4.33 for the youngest age group here between 16 and 25 years. So what else do we see here? The relevance assigned to print media, traditional television and radio increases with age. So that's one thing what we see here. And the second, what I want to point out is that the relevance assigned to YouTube, to social media, decreases with age. However, please note here that the relevance of these services isn't extremely high either. So even for this group, they don't consider it that important for their opinion formation. We also took a more systematic look at the social demographics and on these differences in the assignment of relevance to single services. In this case now, I give you the example for social media. Here you can see the results of a standardized linear regression model, and we did one here for each live domain. On the relevance of social media for the 5 live domains, controlling for the participants' social demographics. And coherently, we can see across all live domains, increasing in age was associated with a lower assignment of relevance for social media, except now then for the socializing domain, we can see a similar effect with higher education. Yeah, higher education, less importance of this algorithmic selection services. Yeah? So another result is that greater internet use was associated with higher assignments to relevance to social media for all live domains that we looked at. And for all live domains, the effects of education have been the greatest, followed by age, and we didn't find any uniform patterns that we found for gender, for income, for political interests. In that case, we didn't find the common pattern. To sum up, our major findings are now that the Swiss internet users, they perceive algorithmic selection applications as being less relevant, in particular compared to offline, but also to other online alternatives. Second, I would argue social media assigned relative low relevance for all live domains that we investigated. Third, I would argue younger and heavier internet users assign greater relevance to various algorithmic selection applications across all live domains. And fourth, people with lower education levels are also more likely to assign higher relevance to algorithmic selection applications. I also want to point out that here that we are fully aware that there are also some methodological limitations of our survey. There might be third-person effects. We saw that already in our qualitative interviews. So they think others are affected, I'm not. And there are also effects of social desirability. They're also reflected in the answers that might lead to a bias in some cases. However, these effects can be at least partially mitigated when we are combining these results then with our results from tracking the same people. Let me conclude. These findings on this assigned relevance of algorithmic selection services, we can see it's substantiating and it's qualifying current claims regarding the high social implications of algorithmic selection applications. They can contribute to an empirically better informed basis for policy making regarding the governance of algorithms. Our results show that evaluating the usage time of specific algorithmic selection applications is not sufficient for the assessment of its importance and effects in daily life. And with the results from our users' perspective, we can complement these existing results. We found, for example, that the perceived relevance of algorithmic selection services are limited, and it differs. It's highest for search engine, that's the highest category in all areas, and it's lowest for social media. So this holds true for all live domains. And on the basis of our empirical assessments, we can define groups with different levels of risks within the society. And we can identify them, and we can also then target them respectively. Yeah, for example, with campaigns that raise the awareness or which raise the algorithmic skills of more vulnerable groups within the society. So altogether, I'm convinced that this will help for future policies in this area, and that we can upgrade it to a next higher level. Thanks for your attention. I'm interested in your questions.
Thank you. So, questions? You can put it yourself.
Thank you for the presentation. I think your research design is just very elegant in that it really beautifully targets exactly what you're looking for. I think some of the best research designs are the simplest ones, and you found a really simple and elegant way to look at a complex problem and bring it to light. The one constraint that I see, which you attested to right from the very beginning, is that you're looking at the subjective perceptions of the influence of algorithmically assigned allocations, which concerns me isn't the right word. I want to ask you to explain a little bit more why it's important to look at the self-perceived assessments, because it shocked me looking to see that people don't think that social media influences their political opinions. That's shocking. I mean, the money, the resources that are being invested into this, the Cambridge Analytica scandals, I think a lot of people would laugh at the fact that citizens are unable to understand the influence that social media is having on their political opinion formation process. So knowing that and then seeing that it's listed last here, does that not just mean that citizens are unable to comprehend whether or not algorithmically assigned data is influencing them or not? Is there a way to complement this research by trying to measure the objective influence, or as a second step? I know that that's very difficult, because how do you know which of these are influencing public opinion? It might be impossible, but even if we can take one of them and show from the literature that we know that social media is influencing to a small extent, and your self-perception scale backs that up, then it will reinforce it to a great extent. So I mean, it's a long question without really asking a question, but I guess if I summarize it in one sentence is, why is it important to us to know how people self-perceive the influence of algorithmically assigned data is, why is that important?
Well, simply because it has an influence what you think about how you act. Yeah. I mean, it has an influence. I mean, it's also, for instance, in another survey, we just asked the people if they're feeling to be surveilled. Yeah, and only because of the feeling they are changing their behavior. Then they said they have the chilling effects. Yeah, and they said 50% of the Swiss population says that they are self-censoring themselves. So it doesn't matter if it's really affecting or not. Yeah, it's also very important what the people think what's happening. Yeah, it's also if you do innovation research, it's not the question if it's really new, if it's felt to be new. Is the most important part of it. Yeah. So I think both has its truth. We need both. We also do it here. We also look at the amount and frequency. I could also show you the slides. It's very hard to isolate the effects of single servers. But I would be very skeptical about. Right now it's the case. They only say people are spending so much time with it, therefore it has this effect. And this is a wrong effect model. Yeah, and this is dominant right now in the discussion. Or they say, yeah, 60% of the Swiss population is on social media. They're spending lots of time. I have all this data. Therefore, it has these effects. So now we have very differentiated, and we can compare it and combine it with the questions: are they aware of algorithmic selection? Are they aware of the related risks? Are they using? Do they have the skills to cope with the perceived risks? So if we combine it, we can say there are people who are naive, yeah, but we also see a specific group, and that's what I said. We can filter out the more vulnerable groups in society, and that should be very helpful then for policy strategies. That would be the idea.
Can I just have a follow-up on this? Because If I had to give a title to your research, I would say that misinformation on social media is fake news, right? That is what you're saying, right?
The misinformation
This
is...
is sort of
No,
the whole problem of
no.
misinformation, that we thought there's a problem, people are, are taking social media seriously too much. There are all these nonsense about immunization, right? There is a whole health crisis in the world now, where people are not taking, using immunization because they read stuff online and sort of start to believe, right? And so, but you say, no, this is not. They don't really believe what is online. It's coming from somewhere else because.
It's somewhere in between. What I'm arguing is we are underestimating users, and you can't talk about all the users. So you have to talk about specific groups. Yeah, and really, if you think about our effect models, it's not that I don't say misinformation is not here, but we don't say here's misinformation. This has the effect. That's what I said. This is a wrong effect model.
Or that, if I understand Ryan correctly, what he's suggesting is that maybe it's so effective that we don't even know that it's affecting us.
Look, I mean, I would be skeptical. It's in between, and I think right now we are on the policy side, and all these discussions are only saying, this is here and this is terrible. It's also, we have echo chambers and this is so terrible. But we can change from one echo chamber to the other. If we have the skills. And so we have to combine these different criteria and to find out and get a more differentiated picture. That's what I'm arguing for.
I'm not sure I got it correctly.
Is it on this there? Is it also yours? Is also on this? Is yours on a different topic or?
No, it's this.
So then please. Sorry, he was first and then.
Thank you very much. I would just like to say that the first topic that comes in my mind, or life domain, that I found missing regarding the algorithm that shape our day-to-day decisions was transportation. When I drive from Tel Aviv to Haifa, I use the mobile app Waze, and it lets me know if I should drive from this road or that road. And I'm sure that if you would put it on the present, or if you would, guess that if you put, it would make
change,
more to the right, both for older people and young people, because comparing between offline and online, it would do so. And other thing that I think about when I think about this specific algorithm, mobile is that it not only shape our way of where should we drive, but in some sense it also shapes it makes the decision for us, because we know that Waze as an app not only okay, this is the amount of people and it's crowded in this road, but it also think about, okay, these are all the people, some of them are asking to drive, so I will let some of them go from this road and let the others go from that road. So in some sense it's even a more affecting algorithm. It's not only okay, this is the decision, but
you're right. I mean, it was difficult to choose these domains, and we went into the literature, what people use if they are analyzing everyday life, but it's mostly all the literature, and then so that's how we got to these areas. We first started on, we had recreation, which had together entertainment and health together, and then we saw it doesn't work out to have it in one domain, so we divided it. So you're right, it would have a different picture, and also to say myself, what's really missing is your job life, your professional life. We also don't have this so much here inside. But mobility would change, but it wouldn't change, for instance, for social media. I mean, it might change altogether the importance, but maybe not for social media. And this is also one of the surprising results that we could see here, that social media are really evaluated or assigned such a low relevance, and on the other hand, there's so much time devoted to it. Yeah, and then but you're right. It would change with live domains.
Because we tend to see technology, or at least myself, we want to criticize it all the time, and that's what the first thing I do. And when I think about the mobile app,
no, look, I mean it's you're again right, but I don't think that I like to criticize it all the time, but
to look at
no,
conspiracy
you know what I'm
behind
doing here. What I'm doing here is fighting against these premature regulations that are coming up in Germany, for instance, now on the EU level and all of that. So my work is mostly to push it back, this regulation. Yeah. And that's why I'm trying to qualify these results, which are only based on some empirical evidence, which is not the right one. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, I'm not sure I got it correctly, but I wanted to ask about the domain which you may not be able to research in Switzerland in the previous 400 years and maybe also in the future 100 years. And that's the situation that we had here in Israel in 2014 during the cycle of violence in Gaza. There was interesting research that showed that Israelis relied more on security, personal security issues, on information they derived from social media compared to information they derived from official IDF and Israeli government announcements. I'm talking about, for example, information, was there a missile attack in this area or that area? They relied more on what they derived from social media. Of course, that was...
I'm really surprised about that, because if you see it in other countries where there are no researches in crisis, they always go to the public television or public...
I'm telling you, there were actual surveys, and the reason is obvious, because, and again, you're asking me the question about, are they dumb or are they too smart, the people? And the issue is that they learned over time that the official announcements tend to have certain reliability issue, and they, on the other hand, they know that there are reliability issues on social media, and somehow they learn how to handle all this mixed reliability information and derive from it eventually information that they feel is...
Right. Yeah. No. That's what I forgot to mention. Maybe the limitations is also included that it has a cultural bias. So this is true for Switzerland, what I find out, but it's not true for Israel. Yeah. So it might be similarities in some cases, but I wouldn't just transfer it.
So do you have any data about what is happening in other places? Is there any comparative study or any indications? No. I mean, not of that scale.
I mean, it is. There are studies about awareness in Germany about algorithms, and also on the EU level. So there are data on that. On this subjective significance, I haven't seen any data, and altogether, I mean, I think this is the first nationwide study, and especially also nationwide tracking that we do here, representative tracking, which is combined with that and which gives it another level of insights. Yeah. So we have single here on that. There are some research about user practices, but then only for single services, for Facebook, for Instagram or so. Yeah. But not also on this broad level. I haven't seen that. Yeah.
So the only thing I can say about Israel is that there are people that are studying trust in Israel, and so this research is also a little bit about trust, and so that and they've been studying trust in the context of disinformation, to what extent a society is resilient to bot attacks during campaign, or to disinformation attack to the type that we've seen in the US presidency elections. And one of the reasons that researchers were more skeptical about such attacks in Israel was that they argue that people in Israel are more trusting their peers, their family and friends in real time, that they meet very often, rather than any other institution. So it's like rather than the press or social media or anything else. So that it has a mitigating force. This is sort of this, cultural issue.
So we have two here and then
you first and then you and then you.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for sharing these insights. It's definitely something I would not have expected at all. But what I'm asking myself is, like, are these results enough to say that we don't need any kind of regulation or any kind of governance approach? Because what you can't take into account are all the subtle forms of manipulation which apparently happen on social media. So I think you're right. The regulation should maybe focus on those subtle forms of manipulation, but I'm not sure, like, if your results are enough to say we don't need any regulation at all. And what would you say? How would you interpret the results? And maybe we also need, like, stronger digital literacy or media literacy. Is that what you want to argue, or what is, like, your takeaway of these results?
I'm definitely not arguing for any regulation. As I said, I'm combining it with guidelines for the systematic search for governance arrangements. Yeah, that would be another presentation. I don't do it now. There's a paper on this governance choice methods, if you're interested, which came out in the handbook this year. And I'm doing that also since decades, and we did it also for regulatory institutions, that we're trying to find out, is there, for instance, the first what are the governance challenge objectives, if interventions are deemed necessary, and then which sort of interventions should be taken. But we need it, and now there's a major difference, and I don't know if you're familiar with that. So as I said, I'm using a risk-based approach. Yeah? So I'm looking at risks and trying to assess the risk, and based on this assessment, then I argue, yes, we need governance, regulation or not. Yeah, we have goals. And then is the next question, what sort of modes should be used? It doesn't have